Today on the Drive Channel, the Jaguar X150, the Jaguar XK. This video is going to be about the genesis of the car. So I've talked already about, I've done a review of the car, I've talked a little bit about what the different models of the car were and where they came from. So this is going to be a little bit more of like where the car came from. So the car was originally debuted as the Advanced Lightweight concept at the North American Auto Show. And that was a car that looked remarkably like the car that I'm in today, which is very rare in the automotive world to have a concept car that actually looks like the car that they end up producing. But nonetheless, they did. That car was designed by Ian Callum, as I mentioned in other videos. X100 was its predecessor, and I got into a little bit of trouble with my viewers because I said that it was a Ford design, which it was definitely not a Ford design. The X100 was based on the Jaguar XJS in terms of suspension and things like that, although it was a totally radically different car than the XJS. But that was designed by Geoff Lawson, who was Jaguar's chief designer at the time, and he was responsible also for the XJ220, which is probably the most underrated car of the 1990s and a car I really like. So when the X150 came around, Jaguar was actually having something of a bit of a renaissance. And so they were actually investing heavily not only in their model range, creating the XF as well as the XK, this car. It was the late noughties, and it was good to see this historic British car company once again reminding the public, at least in the United States, that they actually existed. So watching them try to revamp their image as this as a car for the elite types. Whether or not you are particularly in love with these images is up to you, but I for one was just glad that they were reminding the public of their existence, because so many people seem to have forgotten about it. Now, gorgeous wasn't just a facelift. This wasn't just skin deep. Not only was the car made of aluminum, it had a brand new multi-link suspension, which was designed, as was common in those days in the early 2000s, at, you guessed it, the Nürburgring. And actually quite a bit of testing was done at the Nürburgring, so that this car actually has the handling that belies its looks. So this car was more than just a pretty face. The 4.0 engine was replaced by the newer AJ 4.2 liter engine, which is actually a very important displacement in the world of Jaguar. Very historic displacement, let's say, because that's what the Generation 2 XKEs, or the E-Type Jags, had back in the 60s and early 70s. Despite coming from a lightweight concept car, the XJ was actually not the first Jag to have all aluminum construction. That distinction goes to the XJ of 2003. But eventually, the entire model line went to all aluminum, so that would include not just the XJ, the XK, but the XF, and eventually the XE, the baby Jag. It's pretty impressive to imagine that the car company invested so much money in the tooling required for such an endeavor to have an entire model line of aluminum. So you may be asking about the car's racing pedigree. Does it have any? Well, actually, it does. It's not exactly the best racing pedigree, but Paul Gentilozzi here in the United States raced the XK as a semi-factory backed effort back in 2010, and he didn't have a whole lot of success. But the car did race in that series. It didn't score a lot of points. It was way off of the pace and was eventually retired as an interesting concept, but nothing to write home about. But it did illustrate the sort of credentials of this car, of the design of this car, which was a car that can hit the track despite the fact that it is really a grand touring car. And in fact, as I think I've said in my previous videos about this car, it's one of the best GT cars, certainly that I've ever owned, and I think one of the best GT cars ever made, particularly for its price point. I mean, I paid nothing for this car. I paid so little for this car. It shocks me every day when I'm behind the wheel, particularly when I'm at speed on the highway and I'm listening to the silence and I'm enjoying the sound of the engine and the leather and the wood and all the wonderful things that you would expect from a Jaguar, certainly of its era. I think to myself, how could this car possibly have been as inexpensive as it is? I don't understand why these cars are not more valuable in the marketplace, but even now they're quite a bargain. And as I've mentioned in my future classic video, I don't know if that's going to change, but it probably should. So there you have it. That's a brief introduction as to the genesis of the X150. So if you like this type of content, I have all kinds of different content. I'll probably do I'm thinking about doing some movie reviews, all car related, of course, all car type movies in the future, as well as I'll be updating you guys on the Broco Barchetta, as well as that's my F355 project, which is coming along nicely. And subscribe and like, and we'll talk to you soon.